I'm going to be perfectly honest. I started recording this thing maybe like 4 or 5 times, and oh my god, let's pause. Hello and welcome to HBFT Gaming. I'm HBFT, and we are here for a look at how the Bunny League makes money in Star Wars Interworlds for X4 Foundations. Now, I'm going to be perfectly honest, I've tried to record this video maybe 4 or 5 times already, and every single time I go down another facet of setting up the economy or setting up one's money-making operations, I realize how complex this game is because I constantly want to branch off on tangents. So with that in mind, I'm going to go from top down. I'm basically going to just kind of show what we have running with the disclaimer that I'm a total noob at Star Wars Interworlds, and this is something that I've just sort of made while I'm trying to learn things. So it's definitely not perfect, that's for sure. And if you want me to spend more time talking about something in particular, please let me know or ask me on a stream. I really don't mind. I think actually a stream is probably a great place to go over stuff like this because then I can make sure that I'm giving you information that you're looking for. So without further delay, let's take a quick tour of all of our factories, and then hopefully I'll actually be able to wrap this up in some succinct sort of way. I currently have the game paused, and the reason why is because I was getting so distracted ADHD style at all of the things going on in the galaxy that I wanted to just dive in and get my hands dirty with all these things. So it's an awesome game, trust me. That's why I have it paused. I know it's probably not that interesting to look at, but that would explain the lack of motion. Let's say my very first factory was out in Bastion. That's way in the north in the very deep heart of the Galactic Empire. Now, why out here? Because in Bastion, it tends to be a bit of a stronghold for my allies. If you couldn't guess, I'm allied with the Galactic Empire. You can see that over in the factions and relations section. If we look at Galactic Empire, I'm plus 30. So I'm deeply ensconced in the evil that is the Empire, right? So that's why I chose to build my factories out here. On top of that, they've got a lot of defensive vessels in this place, and it's easy to defend because it actually has one way in and one way out. And more importantly, if we go to the information tab and I select the sector itself, you'll see that under natural resources on the right side here, it actually has access to a wide swathe, a wide variety of different types of resources. So as a new player, I didn't really have to think too much. I'm in a relatively safe place, people are relatively friendly, and I actually get to build in a place where I'm close to a lot of different types of resources, so that even if I get like a small factory going and I want to scale up and let's say I need higher density of materials, I can do that when I understand the system a little better, but at least I can kind of build things in one central location. That was the idea anyway. So my very first factory was a Rhydonium core factory. Now, on the Star Wars Interworlds Discord, I'll leave a link in the description down below. It's a very, very, very helpful place. I've learned so much from the people there. A common path, let's say, for new players in a new career is to actually start by making energy cells and then selling them, then transitioning into making Rhydonium core and selling those specifically to shipyards, and then create Durasteel plates in a Durasteel plate factory and sell those because those are needed in order to build your factories. They're needed to build ships. They're needed to build in large quantities, like a lot of stuff. And then from there, you make yourself a wharf and you work on supplying that wharf to the best of your ability. That's like a very general skeleton plan that I did my best to follow because I am a new player and I wanted the best opportunity for the bunnies when we stream. One thing to note is that will be a little more clear as we move forward, is that everything in the economy in Star Wars Interworlds, and I would say even X4 Foundations, is primarily focused on the creation of vessels of war. So if you're making Rhydonium cores, it's because you're trying to sell them to whatever faction so they can make XL vessels of war. When those things are destroyed, they need more Rhydonium core, right? When you're trying to sell Durasteel plates, it's because they're trying to build factories in order to make components to make vessels of war. Do you see a reoccurring theme here? So in this case, I guess if you're ever trying to figure out what is my end goal, it's eventually to make ships yourself and go to war, or supply ships to the AI so they can go to war and you can make more money. It's a big sandbox, but I guess keeping that in mind kind of puts everything in perspective for me. So the very first factory I made was a Rhydonium core factory. This is a lot larger than I had it. Previously I had basically like a couple of Rhydonium refineries. I had some energy cells. I had a liquid storage, and I had, was it liquid? No, I'm sorry. I had a solid storage for the Rhydonium ore, and I had a container storage. I had a dock, and eventually I added a pier. That was it. So the nice thing about it is that this is able to sell to a shipyard very close by. It's within the same sector, and early on, our pilots have very low skill. So since it's in the same sector, doesn't really need to be able to see out other sectors. So low skill pilots, not a problem. Now, when it came to my next factory, I would say don't pay too much attention to this one. It was actually an engine part factory, and it started out as a Dibana mining thing because I heard that that was potentially somewhat profitable. I didn't look at the market, and even though I built stuff here, to this day, I can't sell it very well. So if I right click, so if I left click first to select the engine part factory, and then I right click for logical overview, you can see that I've got a full storage right here, and I have difficulty selling the stuff because the AI is not low on engine parts, and they're not low on Dibana cells. What they are low on is actually refined metals, and you can see there's actually some sales going on here. So I'm just listing it in the chronological order of things that I did, and I would chalk this one up as a fail. I didn't know how to read the market, so I didn't know where the holes in the AI's economy was, and I ended up building stuff that the AI had plenty of. So I have difficulty moving this, and this overall was a net loss for me. Now, it's not a total loss. I can still use the engine parts later, but much, much later. So as far as for a new player, I'd probably skip out on this. I'm holding back on going on a tangent right now on how to do that. So I would say stick with the Rhydonium core production, the Durasteel plate production, and then move into your wharf. You can branch off from there, but you know, that's probably like the safest bet. They always need those things. So let's stay on topic. On that note, I actually ended up making a Durasteel plate factory next. So that's what I did here. I basically had a Durasteel plate production. So if I go to plan build, you can see in the upper right hand corner production modules, I can snap this open, and I made 2 Durasteel plate production modules. I needed energy cells, I needed graphene production, and refined metal. And that is what allowed me to make some Durasteel plates. Now there's a bunch of other stuff on here as well, because one of the new mechanics I was unfamiliar with in Star Wars Interworlds was actually the need for ship supply. So when you get past a certain point, I believe it's 150 million worth of asset, then you start to need more and more ship supply in order to avoid paying a fee. So that's a whole different topic for another video. But that's why this is a bit of a polluted mess, because I'm essentially making Durasteel plates, and because I had some common elements for ship supply building, I started it here as well. So I guess the point is that that's why it looks this way, but it's a lot simpler. It didn't have to be this complicated. It's just I've got other ship supply factories attached to this Durasteel production. From there, I then decided that if I want to keep building stuff, I'm tired of spending millions, I mean literal millions and millions and millions on needing to purchase Durasteel plates, module prefabs, and energy cells. So I decided I needed to make my own module prefab. So this was the next factory that I made, the module prefab factory, which was a lot more complicated than I thought it would need to be. So this is it right here. And if we look at the logical station overview, you can see there's a lot that goes into making module prefabs, right? So here's module prefabs at the end. And if we look at the logical station overview, all of these blue vertical fields here represent actual physical production modules on our station, and all of the black sections here are basically the inputs and outputs of those production modules. If we look at it, you can see that the module prefab requires module prefab modules. It requires microchips, plasma conductors. it requires capacitors, it requires energy, and then it requires superfluid coolant, silicon wafers, and graphene. So there's a lot that goes into it. But in order to simplify things, you can either go to the station calculator by hitting escape, and then go play open universe, and go down to station design simulator down here on the bottom, which is a great resource and tool that is a whole nother topic for another video. Or if you want, I can leave a link to it as well. This is the Star Wars Interworld Station Calculator. So if you go over to the unofficial wiki and click on stations on the left side, there's a station calculator here. And I can actually say, I'd like to make module prefabs as an example. So I'll scroll down until I find module prefab right here. And I'm going to say, I'd like to make 1 module prefab production worth. And I'll hit calculate. Bam, it tells me everything that I would need. So I can say I'd like to have, you know, let's say 6 module prefab worth. Hit calculate, and it'll rebalance everything and tell me exactly how many of a specific module that I'll need and what the outputs, inputs, everything. It's really, really great. So if you want to set something up and you just want to know exactly what to build, this will tell you just straight up, which is kind of awesome. So it kind of takes a lot of the legwork out of the trial and error process and looking at encyclopedias and doing math on paper and stuff like that, and buying new napkins to do more math, if that makes sense. So I'm going to put that to the side because it's another topic for another video. You see a theme here? It is a little complicated. It is a little bit complicated, but it's also not at the same time. The next thing I did was I made that module prefab factory just so that I could save myself money on making more factories. From there, now that I had my Rhydonium core factory, I had a Durasteel plate factory out here. I probably, if I were to do this in the future, I'd probably try to build them closer together, maybe all in Bastion or something like that, just so that I can trade back and forth more easily. I decided, you know what, I'm going to save up and I'm going to get myself a wharf. So that's the next in the skeleton plan, right? So I ended up coming out here and I was claiming unclaimed sectors specifically because of ship supply. That's another mechanic that I mentioned before. If you do want more info on it, you can go to player information here and then click on messages in the lower left hand corner, and you'll get a few messages in the very beginning of the game. Don't feel like you need to understand everything that it says. I know I did not, but it's nice to remember that they're there so that when you do hit a wall and you go, how the heck do I do that? It will tell you, and you can say, oh yeah, I can go back to the messages and look again. So on that note, if you want to know more about ship supply and, you know, at least a basic primer, you can go back to your messages. There's 2 tabs up here, low and high pry. Low pry, high pry. High pry right here has an introduction letter, and it tells you a little bit about your classification as an organization in the game. And then later on, when you hit, I think 150 million or something like that, there's another letter. It's time for maintenance. This will give you a full breakdown on ship supply. And when you go to this little wrench on the left side here, it'll show you maintenance, and it will show you this screen. It takes a little getting used to figure out what everything means, at least in my case. It took me a while to decipher this, but when I understood it, it became more clear. Let's put it that way. And off after that tangent, that is why I started coming out this way to claim all of these sectors to help with ship supply. Now, I ended up going to this region out here, and if we click on natural resources again, then you will see that it actually has a very similar layout as Bastion. So I decided to make this my home system, and I was able to get my player headquarters. Now, with the player headquarters, I ended up building a lot of my ship production on it. So all of these equipment, Imperial wharfs out here, are used to build small and medium vessels. We've got all of the large ship fabrication bays out here to build the large ones. And then down below, we've got all the XL fabrication bays in order to build the XL vessels. And I put it on the shipyard, or I put it on our player HQ because it seemed like a good enough center of operations, and it was already located in a region that was somewhat isolated that I owned, and I felt like I could just kind of have my own corner of the universe. And once again, it's got one way in and one way out, right? So from there, I kind of took a look and said, what is it that I want to build? Because I needed to get blueprints, and I ended up deciding that I wanted to get more TIE Defender elites because I was constantly losing them in fights, and I'd have to buy and replace them, and it cost millions. So I ended up buying the blueprint for the TIE Defender elite, and then I went build ships. I went small TIE Defender elite, and then I wanted to select a loadout, so I said high preset, and that showed me what components I needed. So from there, top to bottom, engines, I need this TIE HD engine, thrusters, I need some type of small thruster, shield generator, etc., etc. I basically went down the list. I then bought those equipment blueprints so that I could create my own ship, and then from that point, all of a sudden I saw green light. I can actually build one of these things, add a shopping list, and if I were to build out like 100, right now I actually have a ton of materials stockpiled, so I don't have any missing resources, but I started by choosing a really high number and then seeing what resources I was missing. I basically looked at what resources I was missing when I tried to build a lot of them, and then I said, I'm going to start by building those things. And that's how all of this stuff on the right started. So essentially I've got accessory components, which are things like, if we look at the logical overview, it was not this complicated to start, but I found I needed a lot of missiles. So I wanted missile components. I found that I would need smart chips. I would just keep hitting a wall and I need something. And then I figured out, how do I make that thing? And so I used the Star Wars Interworlds station calculator. I used the encyclopedia, and I figured out what it is that I wanted to build, and I started building from there. I'd find out I need more module prefab. I started boosting the output of our module prefab factory. I found I needed more Durasteel plates, etc., etc. And that's how that kind of progressed. So overall, how does our economy work? Well, I've got the components to make vessels. The electronics are also components to make vessels. The Durasteel plates are used to make more factories and to make vessels. The field coils and shield components also used to make vessels. The ship supplies are there. All of this are ship supplies in order to allow us to have larger and larger fleets because of the maintenance thing. That's a topic for another video. So everything is focused on vessels and making ships, right? And then how did I make the money? Well, I went ahead and I said, I'd like to build ships. I'd like to start with TIE Defender Elites because that's what I can build now. Bunny preset, and I'm going to add a shopping list. I'm going to build like 30 of them, and I'd build that. And when they were done, I'd have all these TIE Defender Elites. I would select them all by, clicking down here on unassigned ships, and then I'd hold shift and then click and select all of them. And I would go out, zoom out on the map, and I'd find a friendly wharf like this, and I'd say, I'd like to sell my ships here, and it would show me a price. I would cancel out, and for some reason, Kuat drive yards, they always have the best prices. I mean, look at this, 1.6 million. I'm not going to sell those. 1.6 million versus 1.8 million. Nice. So I definitely sell here, and that's what I would do. And all of a sudden you get like 30, 40 million like that in this big spike, and you just keep trying to sell excess materials, sell ships, and you just keep getting spikes of cash. Now, as I understand it, there are other ways that you can set things up, right? Like, I've heard of players that take their ship wharfs and their shipyards and they put them in places of conflict. And they specifically look at what types of vessels are the AI hoping to use in combat. And they would buy the blueprints for that. They'd set it up in the shipyard or the wharf near the conflict zone. And then they would let the AI purchase from the wharf. And so they don't even have to go about manually selling off ships. Their stuff just keeps printing money for them, right? There's also the way to set up factories. So in the future, I know that a recommendation is to set up your factories in 3 tiers. So one recommendation is to start with refined goods, and then factories for intermediate products, and then the final components needed to build ships, right? So that's another way to organize it. And then you've got traders that move back and forth between each of the tiers, and then finally supply your wharf and you build ships. You see, everything goes towards building ships. I guess with that in mind, I would say start on that skeleton path. if you're trying to figure out how to make money, there's a lot of ways to make money, and I'm going to try to, you know, focus on the constructive method. I love piracy, so obviously there's piracy, but that's a whole tangent for another time. I would say take the recommended path from Star Wars Interworlds Discord. Go with the energy cell production, sell those. Then build a Rhydonium core factory and sell those to a shipyard. You can have your traders basically shuffle over energy cells that you're making from your first factory to your second and just distribute them that way, or you can build energy cells on site like I did. Either way, you know, it's going to make you some cash. And then from there, build a Durasteel plate factory, sell that, and then you make a wharf or some type of shipbuilding fabrication facility and supply it and build ships and sell them. And that's a decent path to actually getting you into the fight and allowing you to, you know, conquer or do whatever you want in the sandbox, really. Because you'll find that as you sell ships to different factions, they will actually fight each other and take territory. Star Wars Interworlds is awesome. I know in X4 I would sell stuff to different factions. I didn't care. I didn't really pay attention to it. But I'm actually noticing when I grabbed like 30 to 60 TIE Defender elites and I sold them to, you know, the Galactic Empire, all of a sudden the Galactic Empire pushed back a whole faction and they've taken a new system. When I started selling to Kuat Driveyard, all of a sudden the New Republic started taking, I don't know, production facilities away from the Galactic Empire. It has a real impact. And that once you start to make that connection and you start to realize that and you see the effects because you're not so tied in the minutia, you know, once you're more comfortable with everything, it's really cool. It's really, really cool. It's so awesome how what you do from selling something to pirating something. If I pirate a trading vessel or a miner and I take away some of the inputs for the facilities and factories of that faction, they either have to build new ones to replace what you took, or, you know, you're stunting their growth. So even just building your own factories when you're allied to a faction, it will pull resources away from that faction. Yeah, they're making money, but I mean, you're pulling away building materials for them to build factories. So it's all intertwined and it's really, really cool. So I'm probably going to end the video here. I realize that's a very, very, very sparse overview of how our economy works. And I know there's so many different topics that we can get into, and I would love to talk to you about them on stream if you have any questions, or if you'd like to see a different video, if this was helpful. God, I hope it was helpful. Please feel free to let me know in the comments below, and maybe we'll go on a more directed rant on that topic instead. But thank you for going along with me on this one. I hope it helped the bunnies that did ask for an overview of the economy, and I hope it does help new players to at least think about how they can make an impact on their own galactic sandbox. Thank you again. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to like, share, comment down below, and all that good stuff. I had a total blast. I hope you did as well, and I can't wait to get into the next one with you. Have a wonderful, wonderful night.